with the US, the UK and Western Europe experiencing unprecedented levels of illegal and legal net migration, why has the West dropped the ball on border control? Are high numbers coming into our countries good for the economy and an answer to our ageing populations? Are they morally the right thing to do as millions flee poverty, persecution and war? Or is the current scale of migration a national security concern and a threat to our values and the Western way of life? Well, to discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome international business guru and global political commentator Hilary Fordwich. Hi, Hilary.
Yeah, pleasure to be here with you, Mark.
Great to have you in the studio. Is this policy of mass migration in the West an accident or by design?
Well, actually, if you think about it, it can't be by accident, because if it's by accident, it would have been fixed by now, wouldn't it? Few things here. Number one, let's just make sure that we all acknowledge there's been a lot, obviously, in the UK that's been in terms of migration over the years and centuries. My gosh, Angles and Saxons and Vikings and...
Not to mention the Irish. I'm a Dolan.
Oh, Dolan, right. No, yes, and we have the best Indian food in the world here in London,
Correct.
right? But they all came with one thing in mind. They came loving this country, and they came to contribute to this country. And the same thing in the US. Immigration, obviously, unless you're an American Indian, you're an immigrant in the United States, even more so than the UK, really, in most recent history, right? That's the huge and vast difference that we must remember before we have this conversation, right? They came, they were legal, they did it the legal way, went through the process, and they assimilated. So I call it the A word. It's about assimilation. They wanted to assimilate to make both countries great. So we have the similar issue here. Now, in terms of numbers, if we can just do a level set here. In the UK, it's total nearly 1 million, something like that, with a population in England, at least, of about, say, 56 million. So in the United States, now illegals are actually near 10 million. That's almost the size of the state of New Jersey, right? So it's more, though, here, percentage-wise, with the population, because it's like 330 million in the US. Now to your question. Right. Is this an accident? It actually can't be, Mark. And you know how, Mark? Because it's on the books in the United States. Biden does not need Congress to stop this. It's actually on the books since 1996. He could, by executive order, stop this. Now, the state of Texas, they have actually got called the Lone Star program. They have decided to defend themselves, putting up barbed wire and stopping this because they can. So it must be deliberate, or else Biden could stop it tomorrow with an executive order.
A political decision.
Has to be.
Am I right in thinking that the figure for illegal immigration into America last year, in 1 year alone, was over 3 million people?
Yes.
And that's 1% of the population.
Absolutely. And again, it's now the size of the state of New Jersey, pretty much.
Indeed. And of course, even the left in America are now complaining about this. New York, which is a Democrat state, has been saying we're overflowing. We can't take any more migrants.
Well, because there's a pressure on the local community. Actually, what happened in Chicago over Thanksgiving, the holiday that everybody knows, you get the turkey dinner in America. Yeah. So in Chicago, ready? 8,000 illegal immigrants were given 6 months free housing, and Mark, they were given a free Thanksgiving meal. The local community, the poor community in Chicago, majority of whom happen to be black people.
Tax-paying Americans.
Tax-paying, well, and poor people there as well. So you're either a taxpayer in case you resent the money, or the poor community happened to be majority black community, went and wanted just a free Thanksgiving lunch, turned away. And now you're having people in in Chicago that were lifelong Democrats saying our party has deserted us and now they're going to vote Republican. That's what's happening. There's like a change here because they're seeing what is happening to their communities.
Now, the issue with this mass migration is that the political elite have inflicted it upon Western societies without any debate, without a mandate.
Without a vote.
The public haven't been asked about what numbers will be acceptable.
Yes. And actually, I'll go back to Winston Churchill. Remember what Churchill said? He said, democracy, he said, it's not necessarily a great form of government, but it's better than all the other ones that have been tried. He said, like the worst form of government. This is what could happen, and this is what sort of the Elon Musk just recently said. Remember, he said on X, he said that the Democrats are wanting to make this a one-party country. This is really, if you want to say about what's the underlying issue here, it's about what's going to happen to democracy, because eventually they can vote. They could vote in the UK for there to be Sharia law or whatever in the country, and that's what can happen in the United States.
And the assumption is that illegal migrants coming in are likely to vote Democrat.
Yes, absolutely, Mark. You're totally right.
Or perhaps Labour in this country.
Yes, except you're right. That is what they're planning on. Yet, Yet, and this is what's interesting, those that have come legally, say, for example, from Cuba, majority of them, they actually end up voting Republican because they have family values and they experience socialism. So they end up actually, so it could, so somewhat actually backfire.
Indeed, and also a lot of people that come into the country want to pull the ladder up. So I'm here now.
That's
Don't want
right.
anyone else to come in.
Exactly, especially those of us that have immigrated legally.
But there is a flip side. What about the idea that migration is necessary for our ageing populations? You're looking at fruit pickers,
yes.
care workers,
yes.
nurses, that sort of
yes.
thing. And the idea, the principle that economic growth is linked to levels of migration.
Well, that's totally fine. But then they should be legal. Go through the legal process. It's all about legal immigration versus illegal. Anybody that would do something illegally, is there a likelihood they might do something else illegal? That's the issue. They're not in the system also.
Why is legal net migration so high? Because Rishi Sunak is at pains to say he wants to stop the boats. But
yes.
you could argue that's a bit of a red herring. That's tens of thousands in a year. But the legal net migration figure for the last calendar year was 700,000 people almost.
Yes, that's right. Yes. 6 to 8.
Again, why is this happening?
Well, if anybody had the exact answer, but I do think it has to do with what Elon Musk said. I do think it's to do with voting, and it's about wanting to change the population.
But why would a Conservative government allow this to happen?
Here in this country? Well, and the question is, how Conservative...
Is this a globalist?
Globalist. Yeah, global.
And what does that mean for the uninitiated? What would that mean, a globalist project?
It actually means, somebody once said recently, and I rather prefer to stick to facts and innuendo, but Bill Gates was at a global meeting with global leaders and was saying, well, but he's not a global leader. And then, but... So maybe it's money and the global corporations, and there's a global influence of wanting to have the global influence.
Now, I know you're no conspiracy theorist, but I mean, is there this idea of no borders? I mean, it was Emmanuel Macron, who I thought was politically very brave a few months ago, when he said on a French TV chat show, we cannot accept the misery of the world. But it seems that the political elite would differ on that one.
Yes, that's what it seems. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what it's seeming.
That it's our job just to swallow up everybody from across the world.
Yes.
And swallow it.
Well, and undermine, and there's also that sort of movement to undermine what had been the establishment. So there's more control. There's more control.
Donald Trump, he's won a string of Republican presidential contests. He could get more good news later today. So he is a shoo-in, isn't he, for the nomination to represent the Republicans in November. Does he win in November if he achieves
currently right now, the only thing is there is no route for him to actually win unless he ends up winning over those that have voted for Nikki Haley. And the deciding factor always in the US is the independents. Obviously, the die-hard Republicans are always going to vote Republican, but it's these independents in the middle, and many of the independents, I think it's 83% of the independents actually voted for Nikki Haley. Those that lean independent Republicans voted for Nikki Haley. So he needs to win over those that voted for her. But yes, he had a sweep in Idaho, Missouri, and Michigan, and he's going into D.C. this Tuesday.
What's your appraisal of Trump? Because he's a very flawed individual, isn't he? I mean, he's not a figure of probity and integrity like you are. He's got a sort of checkered private life and strange attitude towards women, and his endless court cases. Is he really fit for high office?
So, yes, uncouth in many regards, unprofessional in many regards. However, I think it's more, the saddest thing is actually, I think that he actually shoots himself in the foot with some of the things that he says and he does, yes. I'll tell you a great hope that I had. Could I just say, try to stay out of my personal feelings, but when he came to visit the Queen, I covered that for the US networks, he came to visit the Queen, and Mark, he so admired her. And I kept thinking, if only, because that's somebody, I mean, he doesn't sort of admire and verbalise his admiration for many people.
He mainly only admires himself.
And I actually thought to myself, if only he could just have a tiny, minuscule fraction of her diplomacy and her regard for others and her mannerisms, everything, then perhaps it could have improved him. That's a great pity. However, it's his policies where we weren't at war and how well the economy did. That's what people are voting for.
Hilary Fordwich, what a thrill to have you in the studio. You're off back to the States soon.
Yes.
But please join us on Zoom for much more of this.
Absolutely, Mark.
This illumination. Brilliant stuff. What a fascinating conversation.